We're going to talk about language and multilingualism and all kinds of things related with two guests, including Elizabeth Victor, who's the executive director of the LEX Language Project, LEX Language Research Foundation. And with us also is Dr. Suzanne Flynn, professor of linguistics and language acquisition at MIT. And she's also a director of LEX America. Ladies, welcome.
Thank
you don't
you.
mind if I speak English tonight, do you? It's my native tongue. It's about all I know a little French and a little Hebrew, a little Spanish, but not enough. Anyway, it's great to have you. Let me start with Elizabeth. I know about LEX language because I've kind of worked with you guys in another capacity, but it's really a cool project that's been ongoing for many, many years. Why don't you tell us how it works, what it's all about?
Okay. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for inviting us to be here tonight. And LEX America is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to help individuals develop their full human potential through multilingualism and multiculturalism. We have language clubs for individuals and families. They're community-based programs for people to enjoy and share multiple languages together. And what's unique about these clubs is that we are acquiring multiple languages, not just one language at a time, but we are exposing to ourselves to and enjoying multiple languages.
May I ask who the clientele is? Because it's actually American-based, American-born people, as well as people from other countries. You really have a mix of folks involved in this, don't you?
That's right. It's a diverse group of people of all ages and from different countries.
And before we get into the nuance of language, which is so interesting, what LEX does that's very interesting is you have these clubs, you have song, you have teaching tools that I guess have proven their success around the world. Just talk briefly about the kinds of things that go on at LEX.
Okay. Yes, these clubs are active in Japan and Mexico and Korea and the United States. And at these clubs, we have people of all different ages together, adults and whole families learning together. And we are exposing to and speaking languages through song and dance and games. Also, we do listening activities with our CDs. We have original story CDs and song CDs from around the world.
And also books now that are now in various languages, including, I think, a physics book or right? You have a bunch of publications, too.
Yes, we do have a bunch of educational publications touching on natural sciences and language.
Well, let me ask Dr. Flynn the $64,000 opening question. First of all, let me just say, put a statement out there that this is an international society we now live in, let's face it, and learning more language is not only critical for business and socioeconomics, but it's very helpful for socialism.
Right.
Nope, not socializing. Sorry, Freudian slip right there. But let's examine a question that I've always wondered about, and that is, am I able to jump in at my advanced age and learn another language? We're told that it makes sense to do it when people are young.
Absolutely. It's one of these questions and one of these myths that persist, especially in the U.S., that language learning after, say, age 12 is not possible. And what we found, it's actually what I've devoted most of my life to in my career, is to show that that really is a myth. That the capacity, the human capacity for language remains throughout one's lifetime. Now, of course, the earlier the better with respect to some things, like accent, for example. But it's not impossible for you as an adult to learn to speak accent with no accent at all. It's not a problem. It's just the need or your willingness to put the time into it so that you don't speak with an accent. But there are advantages for being an adult in terms of some of the learning that does go on with learning a new language.
When one approaches this, there are so many different ways to go, and the LEX language projects are very, they're goal-oriented, but they're fun. They involve a lot of fun. Right. Has there been research that has indicated one system of learning over another, or do different systems work for different people?
Probably the latter. Different systems do work for different people in different ways. But I have to say that the LEX project or the LEX learning approach is probably the closest thing or the closest sort of approach that really looks like what happens when you learn a first language. It's not, there's no judgment involved. You proceed at your own pace. You sing the sounds of the language first. You come to learn sort of the prosody, the intonation first for the language. And then slowly you acquire the words of the new language. And then you begin to put it together.
My guests are Dr. Suzanne Flynn, and Elizabeth Victor. Elizabeth is the executive director of LEX, this language research foundation. Now, tell me about you. I mean, you've spent some time overseas. You spent time in Japan. Was language always something that fascinated you? Were you studying language in school? Just a brief background.
Okay. Since I was a small child, I've been interested in languages and cultures, and I did study French in junior high school and high school. After college, I went to Japan to teach English and pursue art. And that was where I learned for the first time. I acquired a language by ear through immersion. And that was a very positive experience, being immersed both in the language and in the culture. And that has influenced, my path ever since then.
Would you say, and I'll ask both of you this question, that immersion, which is now a term of art in schools, tends to be pretty successful because you have no choice, but you're in the midst of that language and you sort of dig through it? What would you say about that?
I think that's the most natural and successful way to learn. You still need to be interested and motivated, of course.
Dr. Flynn, comment on that?
No, it's exactly right. Somebody wants to learn. Immersion is probably one of the best experiences because you're forced to use the language. You need to have a need in order to be motivated enough to learn a new language. Yeah. And immersion really does it for you.
When I was in junior high school taking French, it was one period A, and you'd move on, and that would be it. You'd forget about it till the next day. My son, particularly my son, he's now 17, was in the immersion program, and they would have various courses in the language.
Exactly.
And even though he's kind of shy about speaking Spanish, I know he can speak it fluently. So that's obvious that it works.
Right. And actually taking a subject other than the language in that language is actually a very good way, and there's lots of research that supports that.
What about alphabet? I mean, if you're dealing with traditional English-based or Latin-based alphabet, it would seem to me that there's a connection there that you can make. But I know with the LEX project, you've got people learning Japanese and Korean and Swahili, and these are not only different languages but different symbols.
Right.
How does that all come together, do you think?
Well, I feel that with a foreign language, you can learn it very much the same way you learned your first language, which means that first you are immersed, and when you're a comfortable speaker, then it becomes fairly easy for most people to pick up reading. And actually, that was my case with Japanese. I was immersed, and I taught myself to read, first by reading children's books and then teenagers' books, and just reading more until I was able to read well.
The frustration level is something I guess teachers and students and just ordinary folks might have. And how do we combat that? I know that the LEX project does a good job of making you say, not feel pressured.
Right.
But is that key to seeing this through?
I think you have to want to learn the language. And I think the less pressure or to be exactly right, to say it exactly, how, somebody who's a full native speaker says it. I think once you take that pressure off, people are willing to try things. I mean, children make mistakes all the time when they're learning their first language. And we're going through natural stages, and we have to allow the same thing for others when they're learning a new language. It's totally natural. And it's the way that you can explore the language, by creating things, by saying things that are not exactly correct and getting a response from it. And then you calibrate and you change in response to the response that you get to them not understanding you. It's very important.
Is there any research, Dr. Flynn, as to our mental capacity, our ability to learn by learning other language? Does that sort of enforce and embrace better learning overall?
Actually, there's a lot of work on that, or a lot of new work. So there are all these benefits to being multilingual or bilingual. That some of this we've known for a while. Children, as an aggregate, who are bilingual are usually tend to be more talented or have these skills in math at an earlier age. They can deal with metaphor and at a much earlier age, figurative language. And then what we're finding most recently is that there are these executive function enhancements so that people, like executive functions, have to do with things like one's ability to stay on task or one's ability to stay focused. And they find that people who are bilingual are actually better or have these enhanced sort of capacities. And they think it has to do with the fact that you have to focus on what language somebody's speaking. And by doing that, you learn to gate out noise, other noise, and so you can stay focused. And that it really helps. And also they're finding that people who are bilingual sort of, keep at bay dementia, so that there is a real benefit to learn a language, after the age of 50, for example, in terms of maintaining cognitive youth.
That makes perfect sense, absolutely. Keeping your mind busy and activated. Before we take a break, let me mention the website. It's LEX LRF, LEX LRF, that's for the Language Research Foundation part of it. LEXLRF.org. You can call 617-354-1140 if you're interested in finding out more.